Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? I've been watching a lot of Runeslinger's channel recently, and I was been a subscriber for a while, but I've been really checking out some of his videos, and this has me thinking a little bit about genre and game style preference, and so I want to talk about that. And this is not going to be an Ivan Likes the old school OSR or Ivan Likes Rules Light. This is more like what specific genres do I gravitate towards in gaming, and this has been true probably from the beginning. But as a kid, I lacked the ability to express it in the same way, or in a more, in the cogent way, hopefully cogent way. I'll express it now. Um, First off, I tend to gravitate towards any kind of gaming genre where it's outside the realm of normal human experience. The more outside that realm it is, the more I'm interested. Um, I tend to shy away from or be just uninterested in games where the entire genre is mundane or the activities are mundane. Um, they just never really grab me. Uh, so like games where you'd be like a normal person in the normal world doing normal stuff. Even just investigation didn't do it for me. Investigating something that turned out to be Lovecraftian horrors, great, I'm down. Um, but something that's normal, no. And even just being explorers of new and unusual alien planets, cool. Being space merchants, where we're selling and developing trade negotiations and bartering goods and services, less interesting. If that's part of it, great. But if that's the entire thing, where we're just mundane activities that happen to occur in space or like in some fantasy land, not as exciting for me. So that's part of my genre preference. I made a video already where I just like action. I like doing things, and this is true for me. In terms of any kind of I guess entertainment, you'd say. I've always gravitated towards movies that were just kind of more action based or funny, something that got me out of myself entirely. I don't dislike a drama, but I usually have to get pulled to it kicking and screaming because, I if I want drama or if I want misfortune or if I want, the human condition, I can look at my own life or the lives of other people. I have plenty of examples there. I want to be taken outside myself and transported to some, improbable, fantastic world. Um, and, in any kind of thing where I look for media or gaming, I prefer that. And then as far as setting, it's odd because as a reader, I've always preferred science fiction over fantasy. I certainly fell in love with the Lord of the Rings and Narnia and all that stuff when I was a kid. But if you look at, when I go on a fiction reading kick, which is every once in a while, it's generally almost all sci-fi, very little fantasy. However, in a gaming situation, it tends to be the reverse. I much prefer something where it's a fantasy or a swords and sorcery, less high fantasy setting, um, than a science fiction one. And that's always been the case. And I know part of that's probably just because the first thing I got introduced to was something like Dungeons and Dragons. But even after that, Star Adventures, whatever you want to call it, were less interesting. And part of it, it's just a side tangent, was a little bit of verisimilitude or realism or whatever you want to call it when it came to dealing with things like fantastic firearms or even like a lightsaber or whatever. You can kind of explain away why a hit with a sword only does a certain amount of hit points of damage. Okay, what's a glancing blow? You're really good at rolling with the punches. You get shot with a laser, I got less. I got less of that. Probably one of the coolest mechanics I've seen in a while. It was in the Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea book, where there's some alien race where they every once in a while will use these laser guns. If you ever encounter these guys, and if they hit a successful hit, it's a saving throw. Successful hit just kills you, just disintegrates you entirely. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. A saving throw, you take something like, I forget what it is. I'm making this up. 2d8. That's a glancing blow. You just got grazed by this thing that should have just vaporized you. That makes a little more sense to me. So for whatever reason, that's part of a side tangent. That it was harder to explain away the type of injuries you might get from all these fancy weapons that way. Even getting shot with a pistol. I've never been a big fan of like Old West, like something like Boot Hill. Just never grabbed me. Was not that interested. So I mean, I'm not saying I dislike science fiction games. they grab me less. You have to kind of take a closer look at that sort of thing. So those are those are the major genres that I tend to like or gravitate away from. Is I like things to be completely outside my realm of experience. I don't want to play something mundane. It doesn't mean I want to be a superhero, but I want the world to be different than it normally is. And I tend to gravitate something that's more of a little bit of a fantasy, swords and sorcery type thing than a science fiction sort of thing. Those are just my game preferences. I'm sure you have yours. I'm sure I left some stuff out about what I prefer and don't prefer. Another thing too. I guess like I said, I like action. I don't mind solving puzzles and mysteries, but if that's the entire focus of the game, it starts to do it less for me. If a game is based entirely on social interaction, it does it less for me. Whether that's mechanical or not mechanical. I like there to be something going on all the time, some kind of action. So those are my genre preferences. What are yours?